Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Rachel, let me throw a question at you. Have you ever had that feeling where you think someone's not being totally upfront with you, but you just can't quite figure out why? You know, like something's off with their tone, their words, or even just a quick look on their face? Well, today we're going to be talking about how to detect deception.
So you're saying you're going to give us the tools to become human lie detectors? I can see the appeal, Autumn. That would be pretty handy, especially during family gatherings. But let's be real, spotting a lie is a lot harder than it looks on TV, right?
Exactly, Rachel. And that's why we're diving into this fantastic resource called Spy the Lie. It's written by ex-CIA interrogators who've really honed the science of figuring out when someone's lying. This isn't some guessing game. It's a real method for picking up on lies through what people say and how they act. Plus, it points out how our own beliefs can mess with our ability to see the truth.
So we're basically talking about understanding human behavior, peeling back the layers of what people are saying and not saying. Sounds like a mix of psychology and Sherlock Holmes. So what exactly are we going to cover today?
Oh, it's a full house. First, we're tackling those sneaky biases that keep us from seeing the truth, even when it's right in front of us. Then, we're getting into the CIA's toolkit for spotting deceit, a systematic approach to understanding lies. It's like having a secret weapon for every conversation. And lastly, we'll decode the signs of lying, the spoken and unspoken clues that give people away.
Sounds like I'm going to need to take notes. Or maybe a decoder ring. Biases, toolkits, clues. It's a full package for getting to the truth. Let's get started.
So, when we talk about biases, it's important to first understand why detecting deception is so darn difficult. You'd think we'd be experts at spotting lies, wouldn't you? I mean, honesty is pretty high on our societal value list. But the reality? We're really not that great at it. Turns out, we're almost wired to trust people.
Right. And I'm going to guess that this isn't just because we all happen to be naive optimists, huh? It's got to be a little more complex than that. So, what's the psychological explanation here?
Exactly. It isn't about being naive. It's about evolution and how societal norms have shaped us. Think about it this way. Trust is the very foundation for functioning in any community. If we were all chronically suspicious of each other, society would just crumble. Malcolm Muggeridge put it so well when he said, "People do not believe lies because they have to, but because they want to." Trusting, even when things don't quite add up, is easier and less draining than constantly questioning everyone's motives, you know?
Easier, yeah, okay. And most likely safer in many situations, right? I mean, if you go around accusing people of lying all the time, you are not only going to wear yourself out, but you are also going to alienate everyone. Nobody wants to be that person who yells liar every time a story seems a little incomplete.
Exactly, Rachel. But this deeply ingrained instinct to trust creates a psychological barrier. Take a manager who notices an employee regularly missing project deadlines. Instead of immediately suspecting dishonesty, they might rationalize the situation. They might blame external factors like an overwhelming workload or personal stress, rather than suspecting the employee as being dishonest about their progress.
Okay. But is it really just about giving people the benefit of the doubt? Or is there something more to it? Like, are we actively trying not to see the truth?
That's a great point, and it's actually both. It's not only societal norms, but certain cognitive habits like confirmation bias that get in the way. Confirmation bias makes us interpret new information in a way that confirms our existing beliefs. For instance, a parent who trusts their child unconditionally might overlook the subtle signs that something is off, those little inconsistencies in their explanation of why they were late, or maybe that lack of eye contact. They might unconsciously filter out those red flags because they don't fit in with their belief that their child is always truthful.
So basically, we spend most of our time looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. And because it is comfortable, we just keep wearing them, even when someone might be lying right to our faces.
Exactly. And that sense of comfort is really part of the problem. Grappling with the idea that someone close to us, like our kids, colleagues, or even our partners, might be deceptive forces us to confront some deeply uncomfortable emotions. Often, it's just easier to overlook the signs than to confront the possibility that someone we trust might actually betray us.
Okay, so societal and psychological barriers are stacked against us. What about cognitive barriers? Where does mental overload fit in all this?
Right? That's where things get really tricky. Cognitive overload happens when we're overwhelmed by too much information or too many tasks simultaneously, making it harder to really focus on spotting deception. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle in the middle of a thunderstorm, you know? You might grab a few pieces here and there, but the whole picture is blurry.
Got it. So brain power gets stretched too thin, and the little details that could give away a lie just slip under the radar. Got any helpful examples to help illustrate that, huh?
Yeah, there's a great example from the book where a law enforcement officer is interrogating a suspect. Now imagine this. The officer has to process not only what the suspect is saying, but also conflicting witness statements. They also have to analyze body language and think about their next question, all while dealing with the pressure of solving the case quickly. The suspect, meanwhile, might hesitate or avoid direct eye contact when asked specific questions, which might be hints of deceit. But because the officer is juggling so many mental demands, they might miss that one fleeting hesitation or misinterpret other meaningless behaviors, like fidgeting as proof of guilt.
Wow. All right, so basically, once your mental bandwidth is maxed out, you might just skip catching something important and just jump to conclusions based on gut reactions or stereotypes.
Exactly. And that's where mental shortcuts come into play. These are the heuristics. These shortcuts can definitely be useful for quick decisions, but they're also a double-edged sword. For example, let's say you've been trained to associate nervousness with someone lying. If you rely on that single signal instead of looking at the whole cluster of deceptive behaviors, you could easily misread anxiety as guilt and really miss the real cues.
Right, and speaking of misreading, let's tackle the last big barrier you mentioned, this deception paradox. Because, frankly, it already sounds like some riddle.
Yeah, it kind of is. The deception paradox is this counterintuitive idea where focusing too much on identifying the truth can blind us from spotting a lie. The more you stick to an internal narrative of what you believe, whether it's someone's honesty or your own need for reassurance, the harder it becomes to detect deception.
That's almost, well, poetic in how frustrating that sounds, huh? Doesn't the whole point of this to find the truth? How do you ignore the truth to find the lie?
Great question. And that's where context makes all the difference. Really. An outstanding example from the book is the case of Omar, the trusted CIA informant. Before Phil Houston uncovered Omar's deception, he initially viewed him through the lens of decades of reliable performance. Omar used that trust to misdirect, even asking for prayer breaks to avoid answering some critical questions. Phil's initial focus on reinforcing Omar's positive track record really hindered his ability to notice the subtle red flags.
So the trust in Omar's greatest hits blinded him to the fact that the guy was remixing his story. But seriously, this is wild and kind of scary if you think about how easily someone's pre-existing credibility can carry them so far past suspicion.
Precisely. And it's not only limited to the high-stakes world of espionage, right? Think about your everyday situations. A parent who wants to hear that their kid has already done their homework might take a simple yes as proof without actually probing further, even if the kid's tone wasn't really adding up. That desire for a conflict-free resolution often outweighs the effort that you should be spending to dig deeper.
So whether it's a kid skipping homework or a mole in the CIA, the takeaway from this is what? To detach emotionally and dismantle your own expectations?
Bingo. That's where tools such as cultivating emotional detachment, breaking down cognitive overload, and watching out for deflections really come into play. Recognizing the interplay of biases, mental processes, and desires really allows us to step back and assess a situation objectively.
Got it. Keep your emotions in check, slow down your thought process, and don't fall for anyone throwing up smoke screens. Now, I think I am already suspicious of at least half of the people at Thanksgiving dinner. Thanks, Autumn.
Okay, Rachel, so with these challenges laid out, how do we actually spot a lie, according to, say, some CIA pros? What's their secret weapon?
All right, I'm all ears. Now that we've discussed the biases and challenges, Autumn, how do these CIA masterminds propose we actually cut through the deception? What's the magic formula here?
All right, Rachel, this is where it gets interesting. The deception detection method in Spy the Lie has three main parts: timing, clusters, and baselining. They support each other. Each pillar requires a careful observation.
Okay, intriguing. Let's dive into timing first. And since you're inevitably going to give an example, let's skip the childish lies and aim for something a bit more intense.
Agreed. With timing, the first 5 seconds after a question can reveal truth. The idea is simple. The first 5 seconds display the real reaction before someone has time to cook up a lie. For example, a wallet goes missing at an office. The manager asks, "Did you see the wallet?" to an employee. They hesitate and then say, "No, I haven't touched it." That pause is a red flag.
Right, so it's like catching them off guard before they can mask up or build an alibi. But what if someone is just slow? Maybe they need time to process the question.
Great question. It's why you look at the broader picture. If the hesitation comes with discomfort or phrases like, "I think," "to my knowledge," then it forms patterns, which brings us to clusters.
Clusters. Is this like finding constellations of deception? Connecting the dots and shouting, "Aha, liar."
A creative image, but it's pattern recognition. A cluster is when multiple deceptive indicators happen together. One sign might be nothing but two or more. That's a deception symphony. Let's say a mother asks her daughter if she did her homework. The daughter shifts, avoids eye contact, and says, "Yes, kind of." Kind of is verbal red flag, and the fidgeting makes it worse, so it forms a cluster.
A deceit symphony. I like that. But kids naturally fidget and say vague things anyway, right? They're 8, not Shakespeare.
Right. Not every fidgety kid is lying, but if their behavior shifts from their normal, that's important. That's baselining. You have to know what baseline is first. If a kid is restless, fidgeting is normal. But if they're usually calm and suddenly squirm, pay attention.
Got it. Baselining is the before picture. Compare it to the after to spot changes, rather than crying wolf every time someone fidgets.
Exactly. Job interviews are a good example. Say someone is interviewing for a caregiver position. The interviewer starts with easy questions. What do you like to do on weekends? To see how they normally speak. If asked, "What's your experience handling emergencies with children?" and they stammer, that shift matters.
So, adjust for their norm, look for changes, and cross-check clusters. But doesn't baselining have problems? Some people are mysteriously awkward, right?
Good point, Rachel. Culture and personal quirks can skew baselines. In some cultures, avoiding eye contact is respectful, not evasive. And some people are awkward all the time. That's why we shouldn't use just one pillar. Timing, clusters, and baselining must work together.
Right, which leads to ignoring truthful behaviors. I have to say that's confusing. Why ignore truth when trying to find it?
It's about not getting sidetracked by actions that convince you of honesty. Someone who over-explains their innocence or reminds you of their integrity might be hiding something. The book uses the example of a CIA worker. This worker, a suspect in a theft, said Bible quotes, talked about their moral upbringing, and flashed signs of virtue while avoiding questions. That truth parade was a lie.
So pick apart overcompensation. It's like when people say, "Trust me," or, "To be perfectly honest." Someone who works hard to seem sincere might need a closer look.
Exactly. Convincing is different from conveying. Deceptive people focus on convincing you instead of simply answering. So ignore the fluff and focus on weird behavior, clusters, timing, baseline deviations.
Okay, I see how these pillars connect. Timing to catch unfiltered moments, clusters to cross-reference, baselining to spot deviations, and ignoring the theatrics. Sounds simple enough, but is it perfect?
Not perfect, yet these are practical tools. This structured approach helps you move beyond gut feelings. But it takes practice and balance to use these cues and understand the situation. With the methodology down, we need to identify solid behavioral indicators of deception. This is where it gets interesting. We're talking about how lies actually show up, verbally through words, and nonverbally through body language. We'll hit 3 areas: verbal indicators, nonverbal signals, and how crucial it is to look at all this in context.
Okay, so we're looking at what people say, how their body responds while saying it, and then factoring in the situation. Right? Verbal indicators first. What exactly are the types of lies we're looking for?
When it comes to verbal deception, we have 3 main players: lies of commission, omission, and influence. They each twist the truth in their own way. Let's start with commission, the classic, in-your-face lie. It's when someone knowingly makes something up, plain and simple.
Like, "I didn't eat the cake," while rocking crumbs on their face and the obvious kind of stuff. Right?
Spot on. That's the essence of a lie of commission. It's the least subtle, easiest to catch, especially if evidence pops up to contradict it later. Spy the Lie talks about a bookkeeper accused of embezzling $7,500. She told her employers, "To the best of my knowledge, all payments were authorized." Sounds innocent at first, but those qualifiers, "to the best of my knowledge," were her trying to protect herself.
Those weasel words. It's like saying, "As far as I can recall," code for "I'm leaving myself an out." Okay, lies of omission.
Omission works by leaving out critical details rather than straight up denying or inventing. The liar gets to make a technically true statement, but still steer you to the wrong conclusion. Say a CEO is asked about illegal activities in the company. "Not to my knowledge" sounds like a denial, but it's carefully designed to avoid full disclosure.
So, omission is about weaponizing silence, using what you don't say to create plausible deniability. Pretty sneaky. And then there are lies of influence.
Lies of influence? Those are master manipulators. They don't just mess with facts, they play with your emotions. Instead of denying or avoiding, they'll pull out all the stops. "I swear on my mother's grave, I'd never do such a thing." They try to get you to believe them through emotional appeals or relatable stories.
The trust me, I'm a good person routine. This one feels even more manipulative. Really. They're banking on your empathy against you. It's also interesting how these influencers can overdo it. Sometimes those dramatic, swear-to-God claims just feel rehearsed.
Exactly. And that's where verbal qualifiers show up big time. Phrases like, to be honest, trust me, or, as far as I know, might seem innocent on their own. But when they pile up, especially if someone's under pressure, they can act like neon signs.
So, qualifiers and emotional plays can give away verbal lies if you're paying attention. Got it. But words alone aren't enough, right? What about the stealthy side of lying? The nonverbal indicators?
Aha! Nonverbal indicators are so interesting. They offer glimpses into someone's internal state, and often without them realizing it. We're talking behavioral pauses, verbal nonverbal disconnects, and stress gestures. Behavioral pauses are first. It's that little hesitation when you ask a question, and they kind of freeze before answering.
Like their brain's buffering for a split second too long. I see how that could look sus, but couldn't that just be nerves? Or getting caught off guard? I mean, we're all human, right?
Precisely, Rachel. And that's why context is paramount. A pause can be totally normal if someone's genuinely surprised or needs time to process a complex question. But if you ask, did you take the wallet from the break room? And there's a delay. Alarm bells ring, especially if that's paired with vague answers or specific body cues.
Context is king. So, about the verbal-nonverbal disconnect, when does that show up? That's when their words and actions don't sync, right?
Bingo. Verbal-nonverbal disconnects are when there's a clash between what someone says and what they do. Like, they deny wrongdoing, but they're unconsciously shaking their head no. Or they say, I'm excited to work on this, but their body slumps, and they sound totally unenthusiastic. That mismatch can be incredibly revealing.
I'm assuming you also have to factor cultural differences in here, right? Like, avoiding eye contact might be respectful in some cultures, but it looks shifty here. How do you even account for that?
Absolutely. Cultural nuances are a huge deal. That's why baselining, which we talked about earlier, is so important. You have to understand what's normal for that person before you decide their behavior is off. If they're usually animated and they suddenly become stiff and reserved, that deviation matters.
Good point. What about all those fidgets we make when we're stressed? Are those always lie tells? Or just signs of, well, sweating under pressure?
Great question. Stress gestures, grooming behaviors like fixing clothes, adjusting a tie, or playing with a ring don't automatically scream liar. What makes them important is how and when they appear. If someone's asked a tough and high-stakes question and suddenly starts clearing their throat repeatedly or fumbling, you'd pair that with other possible indicators to start identifying deceit.
Let's talk about the cluster approach. When it comes to identifying lies, it seems like the magic is in the combination of behaviors converging. Timing, words, gestures, none of those work alone. But combined, that's when the story comes alive.
You nailed it. And that's the key takeaway. Spotting if someone's lying isn't about finding one golden signal. You need to look at clumps of behaviors, see how they fit within the context, compare them to the person's baseline. One signal might mean nothing, but when several line up, you're that much closer to uncovering deeper truths. Okay, Rachel, time to bring this home. Today, we really dove into the tricky world of spotting lies. We started by looking at why it's so hard to detect deception in the first place. Those psychological and societal barriers that trip us up.
Yeah, Autumn. Things like our natural trust in others, plus those pesky biases. Confirmation bias, cognitive overload, all working against us.
Exactly. And then we moved on to a more structured approach. Almost like a guide from the CIA. Using timing, looking for clusters of deceptive behaviors, and establishing a baseline. Each one is like a tool to help us navigate tricky situations. We also talked about ignoring those over-the-top, I'm telling the truth, displays.
Right, those feel a bit suspect, don't they?
Definitely. And finally, we got into the verbal and nonverbal clues that can tip us off. Lies of commission, omission, and influence. Those show how words can be twisted. And things like hesitations, a disconnect between words and body language, or signs of stress. These might reveal what someone's trying to hide.
So it's all about looking at the whole picture, right? Context is key.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing patterns of behavior.
Okay, so my takeaway from all of this? Lies aren't usually obvious. They're subtle, like breadcrumbs scattered across timing, behavior clusters, and context. Spotting them takes focus, practice, and maybe a bit of emotional distance. It's like keeping your cards close to your chest in poker.
Precisely, Rachel. And to our listeners, here's something to consider. Next time you're unsure about someone's honesty, don't fixate on one thing they said or did. Take a step back, look for patterns, and trust your gut. The truth is very likely hidden in how those signals all come together.
Or, just wear a constant poker face in every conversation. Trust no one. Well, except Autumn, of course.
Oh, please, Rachel. Well, on that note, thanks for listening, everyone. Keep questioning, stay curious, and until next time, happy truth-seeking.